Just 7 days had passed since a heavenly snowfall covered everything in a fluffy white blanket. Roland found himself in his cozy office, sipping his tea and gazing out of his window. Everything looked so peaceful. He felt grateful that the important machines down in the mines were fixed. The soldiers on the town walls were also doing a great job keeping the creepy monsters away. For a moment, Roland felt really happy and started making plans on how to make the small border town richer and better. But that feeling didn't last long. A loud alarm suddenly went off, ripping through the comm. Carter, Roland's right-hand man, burst into the office, looking scared. "Big trouble, boss. Lots of monsters are gathering outside the north wall." At the north part of the town, soldiers were shocked to see a large group of scary creatures, ready to attack. One of those soldiers, Vainer, was gripping his weapon tightly, almost white-knuckled. He remembered joining the army for simple reasons, like getting good food. But now he was facing a battle against terrible monsters. Out of nowhere, a large ox with fiery eyes rushed at the wall. The sound of its hooves pounding the ground was so loud it made the wall shake. The soldiers couldn't even take a closer look at what happened, because suddenly wolves jumped over the wall, using the fallen ox as a stepping stone. Their leader, Axe, was quick to act. "Spears at the ready," he shouted. The soldiers knew exactly what to do. They aimed their spears at the wolves who were lunging towards them. They managed to stop most of the wolves, but one got through. Axe didn't waste a second. He pulled out his gun and shot it, making sure it was a kill shot. Amid all this, Vainer noticed something terrible. One of his soldier friends was on the ground, seriously hurt. His stomach was torn open by the claws of the wolves, and blood was pouring out. For a moment, Vainer felt paralyzed, unable to think or act. That's when Carter's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay focused, everyone. Stick to what you've been trained to do." Vainer snapped back to reality. He told a couple of his men to take the injured soldier for help, while the others prepared for the next wave of monsters. They were all doing their best, and Roland, watching from a distance, felt proud but also really worried. But then, an even stranger monster appeared. Imagine a wolf and a tortoise had a baby, a really big, scary baby with 2 wolf heads and a spiky green shell. Arrows flew through the air, bouncing off the monster's tough armor. Roland called for his Top Gun team, but even their bullets couldn't crack that shell. "Get the gunpowder, Vainer," Roland ordered. But before he could finish his sentence, the creature lunged at the wall. It started pulling the stones apart. The wall couldn't take it anymore, it was starting to break. "Everyone, move back," Roland shouted. Just as he thought the wall would collapse on him, Nightingale swooped in, pulling him to safety. A huge gap now stared back at them where the wall once stood. But Vainer was back, carrying a box with him. Axe yelled at him, "Light it up and put it under that creature." Vainer was sweating bullets, but he remembered the steps. He set the box near the creature and bolted. "Cover your heads," he screamed. Boom! The creature was no more, but they had no time to celebrate. Another group of creatures charged toward the broken wall. The soldiers were out of breath and outnumbered. Roland was desperately thinking of a plan, but things looked bad. Just then, a big, ugly boar burst through the wall of shields, sending soldiers flying through the air. Just when it seemed like the boar would finish them off, Anna appeared. Still in her maid uniform, but now wearing a witch's hat, she looked serious. Her hands moved quickly, and a huge fireball formed. She launched it at the boar. The beast screamed and thrashed as it was consumed by flames. Roland was surprised. "Anna, what are you doing here? You were supposed to be at the medical tent." Brian dropped to his knees on the muddy ground, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, sir, I couldn't keep Anna back. She insisted on coming." Anna, standing nearby, looked concerned but unapologetic. Roland had planned to first introduce the others to MANHUA and then slowly bring Anna and Nightingale into the fold. But all those plans were out the window now. "No time for that," Roland ordered, shifting gears. "Form a shield around Anna." His soldiers snapped to attention. Holding their shields high, they formed a protective circle around her. Anna began to chant and a wall of fire sprang up, reinforcing the battered wall. Seizing the moment, Roland grabbed a flintlock from Carter and took aim. A shot rang out, a demonic wolf dropped. All eyes turned to Roland. "The wall is secured," he declared, raising his hand high. "Back to your positions." A thunderous cheer erupted from the soldiers. They yelled promises to defend their town and their prince with everything they had. The mood was electric. After another grueling hour, the dust began to settle. Just one demonic wolf remained, arrows sticking out from its hide, but it fell just like the rest. Victory was theirs. From the walls, joyful cries rang out. "Long live Prince Roland!" His heart was full seeing his men united and triumphant. But there was one issue left: Anna. Would they see her as a demon because of her powers? To Roland's surprise, his soldiers gathered around her and bowed their heads in respect. It struck him that people fear the unknown, but that fear could turn into gratitude and trust when faced with a common enemy. He walked toward Anna to check if she was all right, but as he held her, she fainted. Her face was pale, drained. "Medic!" Roland shouted, holding her unconscious form. Miles away in a lavish palace, Princess Garcia received some unsettling news. Her father, the king, had been killed, allegedly by the treacherous first prince, who was now awaiting execution. But Garcia knew better. This had the fingerprints of the cunning second prince all over it. He was afraid of her, of the army she controlled. In that moment, Garcia realized the complexity of royal politics and the instability shaking their lands. Yet, back in the border town, Roland was coming to a similar realization, but from a different angle. He understood the value of trust, unity, and the strange magic that arises when people stand together against a common enemy. Both were unaware of each other's struggles and lessons learned that day, yet their fates were more intertwined than they could have ever imagined. But for now, Roland's main concern was the pale, unconscious witch in his arms, and Garcia was plotting her next moves in a dangerous game of royal chess. Princess Garcia sensed the urgent need for a change in strategy. She had her messengers spread the call for an emergency meeting with all her fleet captains. When they arrived, her subordinate dropped to one knee, hesitating only a moment before upgrading his address from "Your Highness" to "Your Majesty, the Queen." Meanwhile, in the small border town, a newfound sense of peace and hope filled the air. The terrifying demonic beasts that had once tormented them seemed to have retreated. Soldiers who had been injured were back at their posts, their spirits high. Carter had even incorporated the shell of a slain beast into the town's defenses. But Roland was troubled as he walked toward Anna's room. She was still in a coma, a full week after her heroic acts had saved them all. Sitting by her bedside, Manhwa and Nightingale looked up as he entered, their faces lined with worry. Nightingale broke the news that Anna was on the verge of coming of age, a significant milestone fraught with its own dangers, especially in her comatose state. "Anna's odds," Nightingale said, "were not good." The room felt heavy as Nightingale recounted the dark times she'd seen, where witches like herself were treated like abominations, executed or driven into exile. She spoke of the elusive Holy Mountain, a mythic sanctuary that witches spoke of when all seemed lost. But Anna, she said, had already found her sanctuary in the love and respect of the people around her. As Roland stood by Anna's bedside, gripping her lifeless hand, memories of their shared times flooded back. The ticking clock and the chilly wind whipping against the windows heightened the sense of dread. But then, something miraculous happened. As midnight approached, Nightingale sensed a shift in the energy in the room. Roland's eyes widened, fearing the worst, that Anna was undergoing some unspeakable pain. But to everyone's shock, her face was calm. The room darkened as a candle extinguished, making the atmosphere heavy with the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. And just as suddenly, Anna's eyes opened. A radiant green flame burst into life in Anna's palm, washing the room in an eerie, yet comforting glow. Roland stared in disbelief, captivated by the mysterious flame that seemed to dance and pulse with its own life force. Anna looked at him, nodded, and then extended her hand, offering the flame to him. Cautiously, he reached out, half expecting to get burned. To his astonishment, he felt nothing, no heat, no sting. Anna's newfound power was stunning. She could control her flame's temperature, bending it to her will. Anna and Roland both knew this was remarkable. Usually, witches suffered severe consequences during their coming of age, a period of turbulent and often dangerous power development. Many didn't survive. But Anna had broken the cycle, likely because she'd used all her magic in the intense battle against the demonic beasts. This exhaustion might have prevented the usual backlash, allowing her to safely transition. Nightingale realized the profound implications of this. She pledged to share this newfound knowledge with the Witch Association, promising to come back with her sisters in arms. Roland felt uneasy about letting her leave, especially with the month of the demons still ongoing and beasts lurking in the wilderness. But Nightingale assured him the message was too important to delay. As Roland pondered all these developments, Bhairav burst into his office with an urgent update. An ambassador from the Changu stronghold had arrived with crucial news. The look on the ambassador's face was grave, and as Roland read the letter he'd been given, his own expression mirrored the ambassador's concern. The letter announced a terrible reality: the king was dead. And now, Roland's second brother, Timothy Wimbledon, had claimed the throne. Summoned back to the capital before winter's end, Roland was mired in doubt and suspicion. The death of the king and the sudden rise of Timothy all seemed far too convenient. He resolved to tread carefully, waiting for the reactions of his two sisters before making his next move. The kingdom teetered on the edge of chaos, and any wrong step could tip it into an abyss. Returning to his office, Roland felt like he was juggling too many balls in the air: Anna's miraculous awakening, Nightingale's vital mission, and now a kingdom in turmoil. He looked out of his window, lost in his thoughts. What should he do next? The snow outside seemed to reflect his internal storm. One thing was clear, though: the road ahead was fraught with peril, and he'd need all the help he could get to navigate it. He thought about Anna's miraculous flame, the promise it held, and it ignited a tiny spark of hope within him. Perhaps, just perhaps, they'd find a way to turn the tides yet. In a flurry of urgency, Roland instructed Bhairav to move their family and close relatives out of the capital post-haste. Together with Bhairav and Carter, he penned letters meant to secure safe passage for their family. They would be escorted by trustworthy men under Roland's command. But he didn't stop there. Roland also suspended the export of iron ores and initiated a recruitment drive to bolster his own forces. As he weighed his options, a realization dawned on him: this turmoil could be an opportunity in disguise. Refusing the new king's orders would most likely earn the wrath of Duke Ryan, who would consider it an act of rebellion. Yet, the same rebellion offered him a chance to seize the Changu stronghold, expand his territory, and gain control of its wealth and people. The possibilities excited him. His strategic mind buzzed with plans and counterplans, each pushing him closer to his ultimate goal. Meanwhile, Nightingale, also known as Veronica, arrived at a hidden valley, her path obstructed by a wall of thick vines. Leaf appeared, the white armbands she wore marking the loss of two witches. As they walked deeper into the cave, Wendy ran up to Nightingale, gripping her hands tightly. She was evidently concerned for Anna, who Nightingale had promised to bring into the fold of the Witch Association. Taking the opportunity, Nightingale recounted her experiences at the border town. She shared news about Roland, the fourth prince, who offered them sanctuary. To further sway them, Nightingale divulged that Anna and Manhua had already been saved. Yet, just as she was gaining the crowd's trust, a voice silenced her. A middle-aged witch Nightingale knew as her mentor voiced stern objections, plunging the room into a tense silence. Back at Grey Castle, Timothy was handed a high-quality crystal, its authenticity confirmed by the Holy Church. Despite this, he was plagued by an unsettling feeling. Could witches have been involved in the king's demise? Taking no chances, he ordered an immediate witch hunt throughout the capital. Suddenly, Nightingale awoke, her wrists tightly bound. Nightingale's thoughts whirled as she remembered her mentor's harsh words. This woman, who had trained her in the ways of witchcraft, had suddenly become her harshest critic. She had accused Nightingale of being naive and falling for human lies. According to the mentor, their rigorous coming-of-age tests were divine rites, set by the gods to test both their mental and physical endurance. Those who failed were, in her eyes, unworthy of reaching the holy mountain, a revered destination for all witches. Just as Nightingale was about to argue, she felt a sharp sting in her leg. A snake had bitten her, and she collapsed, weakened and vulnerable. Her mentor stood over her, clutching a locket that had drained Nightingale of her magical powers. Waving a glowing hot knife close to her throat, the mentor accused her of betrayal. Nightingale tried to reason with her. "I just want to give our sisters a choice, a chance for a better life," she protested, but her words fell on deaf ears. Her mentor, seething with rage, tossed the blueprints of the steam machine into the fire, erasing any prospect of technological progress. Just then, Wendy's scream pierced the air. "Enough! Stop this!" She stood by Nightingale, insisting that every witch had the right to choose their own path. The room was thick with tension, each witch hesitating, unsure of what step to take next. Wendy's plea seemed to shift the room's energy. Most witches slowly nodded, aligning themselves with her. Just as they reached an agreement, the mentor, her eyes aflame with fury, raised her knife to strike Nightingale down. Wendy wasn't having it. With a quick flick of her wrist, she summoned her powers and disarmed the mentor, shattering the magical locket and freeing Nightingale. Angry and humiliated, the mentor lunged at Wendy, snake in hand. The snake bit Wendy's arm. Reacting swiftly, Nightingale drove her own blade into her mentor, giving her and Wendy the precious seconds they needed to escape. As they ran, Wendy's arm grew increasingly numb, the snake venom was spreading. Faced with a grim choice, Nightingale had to amputate Wendy's arm to save her life. She bandaged the wound as best as she could, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. They needed to get back to the border town and find MANHUA, but Nightingale was uncertain Wendy could make it. Then, out of nowhere, a glowing figure appeared behind them. A young, bright-haired girl named Lightning, who had recently joined the Witches' Association. She floated above the ground as if defying gravity. "I believe you," she said to Nightingale. "What can we do to help?" As Nightingale looked into Lightning's eyes, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had found an ally who could help them change the course of their lives and those of their fellow witches. It was on one of her explorations that she encountered Lightning, a young girl with a peculiar ability. With wings as vibrant as a summer sky, Lightning could fly. This extraordinary talent was just what Nightingale needed. With Wendy injured, Nightingale quickly tied her friend securely to her back, and, with a mutual nod, they both mounted Lightning. Their destination? Border town. As the trio glided through the canvas of clouds, Nightingale, amidst the cold wind and breathtaking views, started narrating her story. It was a tale Amara hadn't expected. The sprawling city of Silverlight had once been Nightingale's home. A place of laughter, love, and family. But when she was merely 14, chaos erupted. A riot, sudden and violent, had torn her world apart, claiming the lives of her parents and leaving her and her younger brother, Hyde, in the merciless grasp of the world. Her uncle, a man they thought they could trust, offered them shelter. However, this refuge soon turned into a prison. Upon discovering Nightingale's nascent witch powers, he saw an opportunity, not a niece. The young girl was then trained, under threats against Hyde, to be a weapon. She became an assassin for the Glenn family, eliminating their rivals one by one. As the years blurred, her hopes of seeing her brother faded. But fate is unpredictable. One day, she did find Hyde, but the reunion was far from joyous. Hyde, with eyes filled with disdain, renounced Nightingale, condemning her and other witches like her. That moment was a dagger through Nightingale's heart, but it was also the moment she decided to change her fate. She not only survived the perilous coming of age for witches, but also avenged herself on her wicked uncle. Yet, life wasn't all about vengeance. Wendy entered Nightingale's life, a beacon of hope and happiness. Wendy's radiant smile, her unwavering faith, mended Nightingale's fractured soul. It was this bond that drove Nightingale to protect and save Wendy at all costs, even if it meant confronting her own kin, who had been misled by extremist beliefs against witches. Meanwhile, in a distant workshop in Border Town, Roland and Anna were engrossed, perfecting a steam machine. Their world of gears and steam was disrupted when a deafening crash resonated. Lightning, with Nightingale and Wendy, had arrived, marking the beginning of another chapter in this epic tale.